Hey everybody, welcome to episode 4 of StadiaCast. I'm Bill. That's Lloyd right over there. What's going on, Lloyd?
Not much, man. We're ready to talk about let's talk about stealing some stuff.
Oh my gosh. Okay, let's start off with I have a confession. All right?
Okay.
I have a confession that I used to be a pirate. I used to steal stuff all the time. Like back in the you go back to the days of Napster. And I would download music. This is on dial-up, by the way. I used to install Roadrunner, but I didn't have Roadrunner. But I used to install Roadrunner, so I would be on the road all day. Roadrunner was cable internet access,
Sure.
so I would drive around all day, and I would have the radio on, and I kept a pad of paper and a pencil on the passenger seat of my car, and as I was driving around, if the song came on that I liked, I would be like, "Oh, all right, I'd pull over and I'd write the name of the song down. If the DJ would tell us the damn name of the song, I'd write it down, and then I'd get home and I would have either Napster or LimeWire or whatever it was. I would have it download all these songs at night, and I really didn't see, because I was young, I really
hmm
didn't see a problem with that. And I did the same thing for video games. Now, are you also a reformed thief?
Never. I would never do such a thing. Well, of course, yeah. In my youth, music was the big thing. Like when Napster came out, you could actually browse other people's libraries. That was the best thing because I was into electronic music. So whether it was trance or drum and bass or whatever back in the day, you just couldn't get that here. And I would find all this amazing music from the UK or whatever, and then I would figure out what I wanted based on those tracks, and I would order all these CDs from the UK, and I would have all this stuff coming in the mail constantly just because of Napster. So while I was stealing music, I was also buying a hell of a lot of music directly from these artists in the UK, and that was the best part about Napster back in the day. But yeah, like software and all that stuff. I used to run a BBS and all those things like that. That was something you did as a kid. Unfortunately, it's a dark part of my past, Bill.
Yeah, I still have it. It's this you remember the folders for your CDs?
Yes.
I
Yeah.
have I have this giant folder filled with CDs of software that I used
Right.
back in the 90s, like Photoshop,
Right.
Bryce, all this crazy software and video games. It doesn't
Right.
do me any good now. I don't know why I just don't throw it in the trash because I don't even have a disk drive on my computer. When I built my computer, Windows 10 came on a USB stick, so I was like, I'm not going to waste $30 on a disk drive, so who needs it? Um, so I can't even use these things. Not that I would anyway. But I mean, it was a simpler time, and while I don't do that anymore, the
Mhm.
Pirate Bay certainly isn't going anywhere. Or I don't know. I mean, that was huge years back. I don't know if it's still huge
Sure.
now, um, or if it's been shut down, but it's not going anywhere. And
Definitely not.
the fact that we're moving into this era where you don't run the software on your PC
Mhm.
could mean that finally the people who have been fighting against the pirates for all these years, the white hat people, I guess,
Yep.
they could finally win this battle. It's not going to happen soon because we still have things like Xbox and PlayStation and Nintendo Switch and
Sure.
our PC games. And I've always said that in the battle over DRM, the hackers are always going to win over the quote unquote good guys, and the reason is because there's more of them and they're smarter. Um,
Sure.
so I think that Google Stadia, well, okay. I mean, in the show notes it says how Stadia could end game piracy, but it's not going to be Stadia that does it. It's going to be Stadia and Xbox. What's the Xbox thing called that there were X Cloud?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they have their Game Pass now, which is downloading games, and then they're moving into Project X Cloud, which is their streaming service.
right. So the xCloud and Stadia and whatever PlayStation does in response to all this, and maybe in the future whatever Nintendo does, and whatever PC gaming does in response to all this, they fought about against these guys like this battle for years. And what they didn't realize is that this battle was already figured out a long time ago
Sure.
by the music industry. The music industry said, if we just make it convenient, then people will stop stealing our stuff. Because I'm sure that you can still have music piracy happen, but it's not like it was in the days of Napster where everybody was stealing everything. I don't think anybody
Yeah.
was buying anything back then.
No, because you to get the one song you wanted, you had to buy a $25 album because that was the only price for it, and that was just crazy. And now you can go and buy whatever song you want for 99 cents. I mean, that got rid of that issue. And the same sort of thing happened on in the games industry because, well, consoles were hard to pirate back in the day. I remember seeing my first Super Nintendo pirating system where you basically had to load this cartridges. You'd put this thing on your Super Nintendo, you'd put your cartridge in the wrong way, and it had a floppy disk drive, and you put a floppy in there, and you'd hit a button and it would copy the ROM from the cartridge to the floppy disk. And I remember one of my buddies came back from I don't know if it was China or Japan with one of these. He's like, "This is amazing," but you needed to use like I think it was a European Super Nintendo is what he had. And I'm like, "Yeah, it's great. You can't actually put any games that you own in there. This is fantastic. You're amazing." So it went from that to Dreamcast, where you basically would put the disc into your system. You hit a button on a piece of software, it would copy it to your drive, to your computer. Then you hit another button and it would write it to a blank disk. So that piracy went from difficult and hard to do to anybody could do it to modern systems, which are all heavily encrypted. And then someone would just leak an encryption key, and then next thing you know, everything would get blown up, and then all the way to like the iOS App Store where you don't actually own any of the software it seems because they can be taken off the store and you can't re-download them, but they're also very difficult to pirate unless you actually compromise the whole platform that you're on. So our industry has gone from um, make a copy of your floppy and then photocopy your instruction manual and give that to your friend, to really difficult, to copying systems, to jailbreaking, and then all the way back now to Stadia, where you don't physically have any of the code, so you can't pirate what you don't have in your hands. So even the controlled walled gardens that we have right now in the gaming industry, you still have executable, the code is running on that piece of hardware you have in your system, or in your house rather. um, Stadia is going to make it so you don't even have that. All you're getting is a video signal. So I guess you could pirate your video signal, but they're already doing that for you. They're even going
Yeah,
that extra step
that's a feature.
by doing it for you. Exactly. So yeah, I think things like Stadia could definitely change piracy for the better, like the piracy in the industry for the better. Because how many stories do you remember reading over the last 10 years where games are hitting the Pirate Bay before they're even in stores, even before they're active for downloadable, like if your downloadable shops, right, like PlayStation Store or Xbox, that's going to go away. Not initially, because the games that are being released on Stadia, they're probably going to be released on Steam and other platforms, at least
Right.
initially.
Yeah.
But this just takes one aspect of people pirating games away from them, or away from the pirates out there.
Yeah, outside of of somebody who works at Google or at a video game company leaking the software online, I don't know that there's going to be any way, because it's not sending the game to you, it's just sending a video of the game to you. So
Correct.
I think the days of this kind of the piracy as we know it are going to be over in the near future. I'm not saying this year. In 2019, there's still going to be people downloading stuff.
Mhm.
But in the future, 10 years down the road, and when you're old like me, you think that 10 years is near. But in 10 years, I don't see places like the Pirate Bay working for something like video games anymore outside of like retro games. And at that point, retro games would be like Xbox One and PS4 games, which is a weird thing to think of. Nintendo fought against this for years. I mean, Nintendo's fight against piracy is one of the things that caused it to lose its its front runner status, because in the days of the N64, when they were about to go with the Nintendo PlayStation,
Mhm.
they decided, you know what, we're gonna go with a cartridge instead, and they pretended that it was because there's no load times, but it's really because it was harder to copy it. It
Sure.
was basically their form of DRM, and it caused them to lose, and they went from first place to dead last in very short order. Even though I've got one but sitting behind me, I was a huge fan of that console. It hurt Nintendo a lot, and more often than not, I feel like DRM gets in the way of people who pay for the software, and it never seems to get in the way for the people who steal it. So I've always been somebody who's like anti DRM. I don't want that stuff. It drives me crazy. But Steam effectively has DRM, and I'm a huge fan of Steam because they've made it so convenient. And if you give me the choice to pay for something and have it be convenient, or not pay for something and have it be a giant pain in the butt where I have to, can't remember the name of the software. What was the software that you would use on Windows? Um, it would have a little disk down in your system tray, and you would right click on that disk and load in a disk for like a bin or a queue disk. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I recognize doing that. I remember doing that, but I don't remember the name for that.
Well, if anybody out there remembers it, let us know. We're at StadiaCast on Twitter. Um, I can't remember the name of it, but I like that was such a pain, and I put up with it because I was poor, didn't have any money, and it was easier for me to download stuff at that point. But as I got older and got a real job and had enough money to pay for the things that I wanted to use, I started understanding that it's much easier to just pay for things than it is to steal them. And Stadia is
Yep.
going to make it even more frictionless as they make it so you're watching a video and you can just click a button and start playing.
Yeah. And I can remember articles on all the different gaming sites where a new game would come out and it would be pretty much unplayable based on your PC specs. And then you could download the pirated version and it would play fine. And that's because of all the DRM stuff that these
Hmm.
publishers are putting into it. I can remember Ubisoft, one of their early versions of Uplay from like 2010 or 2011 or 2012, somewhere in there, early 2010s, basically was a rootkit. And if you installed a game with that, it was almost impossible to get rid of that rootkit. And the same happened with different PC manufacturers and things like that. But the story was always the pirated version runs better than the standard version because of all that DRM garbage that would bring most systems to their knees. That's going to go away with Stadia because you're not running any of the executables on your home system, which means the games are going to play better with air quotes because of lag and different things that will happen on the streaming of the game. But all that stuff is going to run as fast as it possibly can on the bare metal in Google's server cloud, which is going to be fantastic for us because we're not going to have these reduced performances on these video games. Of course, that also means we have to deal with internet lag and things like that. But I mean, we're slowly we're slowly fixing this problem through a number of different ways. So it's going to take some time for internet technology to catch up with kind of the ideas of the time.
Yeah, and the developers don't have to spend time trying to figure out, because you know that they make the game and then they're like, okay, how are we going to DRM this so that people can't steal it? And that's time that is not spent working on making the game better, fixing the game bugs, working on maybe the next game. That's time that could be better spent doing other things. And the fact that these developers aren't going to have to worry about game piracy anymore, that means that we're going to get better games. Now, I saw somebody tweet about this. They weren't tweeting it at us, so I didn't grab it for the show. But they said something about along the lines of, "Oh, because developers don't have to worry about piracy, then." games are going to be cheaper. No, they're not going to be cheaper. Nothing ever gets cheaper. It just makes more money for the developers, because once they've decided, oh my gosh, somebody's going to pay $20 for this 2x4. Well, I'm never going to make it less than $20 then. Maybe
Right.
maybe $21 or maybe $22, and I'll keep raising the price until people say, "What the hell is going on here?" And then they'll stop.
Hmm.
But I don't, just because the developers don't have to spend money fighting game piracy doesn't mean that we're going to be spending less on games. Although we still don't know the monetization model, and that's definitely something we'll tackle in a future episode. But the games aren't going to be cheaper, and if you think that that's a pipe dream that you're just going to have to let go of as soon as possible.
100%. But it's also a pipe dream that was put in our heads because of all the publishers out there. When they come out and say, "Well, we have to charge $60 because we have to make our money back, and there's X number of dollars that go to piracy and all this other development, and we have to put them on trucks and all this stuff. That's why we charge $60." And then now we can download the same game for $60, and they don't have to do any of that stuff. And they're just like, I don't know, it's just a thing. We're dealing with it. It's hard numbers, spreadsheets, it's terrible. And you realize that they're just blowing smoke, that really they just want to charge $60. And I get that. They Making games these days is really, really expensive compared to back in the day when you'd have four Nintendo developers locked up in somewhere in Kyoto, banging out a game before they could leave. Now it's 300 people that are essentially locked in their offices doing that all over the world. So I get game development has gone up in price, but it would be nice if the, the streaming stuff would make games cheaper, maybe by the fact that you don't have to buy them flat out. You're using a streaming service like Netflix to play these games. Maybe that'll be the way that they get a little bit cheaper. But hopefully this will be a nice side effect. But I'm not going to hold my breath.
Yeah. And boy, I've got to stop responding to you with "yeah" at the beginning of whatever it is that I have to say, because I've done that a lot, and I think I did it last episode too. So if you guys hear me saying "yeah" as soon as Lloyd finishes his point, you tweet at me at Run Jump Stomp. Bill, you're saying "yeah" all the time, and I'm going to work on that. Speaking of working on things, we've got some Google I/O 2019 information. We
Hmm.
actually had this in the show notes last week, but Lloyd and I got all excited about whatever was after that, mostly because that was a text story, and the next thing was like had a big picture or something in the show notes.
Yeah,
So we
great
just
colors.
missed it. Lloyd, why don't you tell us all about Google I/O 2019 and how it relates to Stadia?
Sure. Well, Google I/O is Google's big development conference that they do every year. People have probably seen a lot of the live streams, or at least parts of the live streams, because it for a while it was famous, where we're unveiling this Google Pixel and this Google Chromebook and this Google whatever, and it's like, and you have one, it's under your chair, and everybody's like flying up in the air. It's like the Oprah moment, right? But Google I/O has still been going on since then. They've unveiled things. They had the one, I think the one big thing recently was someone jumped out of a plane to land with a device and hand it over to someone. So there was like this big montage of this person jumping out of a plane and landing. So crazy stuff happens at Google I/O. It's still a big spectacle. But it is happening again this year, May 7th to May 9th. And they've added on a whole bunch of Stadia stuff. They have a Stadia track. So it looks like this will be kind of like a mini GDC for Stadia folks. It starts off with Stadia streaming tech. And then it continues on further in the schedule with some other things like large scale multiplayer gaming and what's new in gaming at Google. So it is really interesting to see games become a focus of IO, where they've had kind of like the Android ecosystem for many years, and I don't really remember them ever doing a lot of gaming talks at Google I/O. But it could be because maybe I wasn't paying that much attention in previous years.
That's true. I probably, I mean, I always watch Google I/O because I am an iOS guy, but I tried Android for a couple years, and I think both of them are perfectly acceptable ways of getting things done on a rounded rectangle in your hand. Um,
Yeah.
I think that they're both fine. In fact, right now I've been kind of eyeballing the Pixel, waiting for Pixel 4 and seeing what it's like. Not because there's anything wrong with my phone now, um, just because I always am interested. The grass is always greener, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So, uh, I've been looking at that, and I'm excited for Google I/O. So we're gonna have something to talk about news related outside of, because right now Lloyd and I have been breaking the show down as to, okay, let's talk about this aspect of video games and how it could be affected by Stadia every week. And like last week was VR, and this week is piracy, and maybe next week is, I can't remember what I said in our little private chat, but uh, every single week we've got something where we're going to talk about how Stadia is going to affect that part of gaming. But eventually,
Mhm.
Google is going to start giving us information. And we're going to be talking about this a lot. And you can guarantee that week of May, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure that you subscribe so that you can be here for that discussion, because we're going to. Do you think it's going to be mostly developer related, or I feel like this is going to be much more consumer focused than at GDC?
Yeah, well, IO from a whole is very developer related, but they always have that big multi-hour stream at the start. So they're gonna talk about whatever new phone they're working on, whatever new streaming device they're working on, whatever new laptop they're working on. But they're probably going to carve up some time to talk about Stadia because this is like the time between now and E3. IO kind of falls right in the middle of it. So they're gonna drop some other bombs like um, I don't know, Bethesda is making this game and EA is making this game or something along those lines. Like they'll have a couple newsy sort of things that will come out during that keynote.
Yeah. By the way, EA, I guarantee, I'm making a prediction right now. Line in the sand, this far, no farther. EA will definitely 100% bring a game to Stadia, and it's going to be FIFA. And it's because they're
Mm,
contractually obligated to bring a copy of FIFA to every platform that exists. At least I think
sure.
they are. I've read that someplace. So EA will at least make a version of FIFA for Stadia, if nothing else. So there you go.
Yeah, that'll definitely happen. And it's right up there. I think it's called the Skyrim agreement. So you have to have Skyrim on everything, and you have to have FIFA on everything. So
Okay, you bring up Skyrim, which automatically makes me think of Elder Scrolls Online. If
mhm.
you had to pick, are you an MMO guy?
I used to be. I was a hopeless addict to games like Ultima Online. I had like six accounts at one point in Ultima Online and doing all that crazy stuff and played Dark Age of Camelot and all the stuff all the way up to Warcraft, World of Warcraft, and then realized how much of my life I was spending playing these games, and then kind of quit cold turkey for the most part.
So you're probably not the person to ask. So I'm going to ask the audience instead. Those of you who are listening, if you could have one MMO and only one MMO that got ported to Stadia, what would you want ported? And for me, I think it would be Final Fantasy 14 myself, because I am a huge fan of that game. It's really, really fun, and it's very controller centric, but I'm just a huge fan. So you would like Ultima Online then?
No, no,
No,
not so much
nobody
anymore.
wants that.
No, not anymore. I would love World of Warcraft to be good ported to Stadia because then that means I'd be able to play with a controller finally and be able to play it on all my systems, including my big TVs, instead of just having to sit in front of my monitor and do that.
Well, I don't know that they would actually. I, Blizzard Blizzard has always fought against this idea of giving
Mhm.
controller support to World of Warcraft, and I don't understand their hesitance for it. But they
Mhm.
wouldn't have to support World of Warcraft on a controller if they ported it to Stadia, because if you
Sure.
remember during the announcement for Stadia, they showed they were playing on a Chromebook with a mouse, and they were using mouse and keyboard to play Assassin's Creed, Stadia. I can't remember which one it is. They're all the same to me. Assassin's Creed, dude kills some things.
Odyssey,
Yeah, okay,
Odyssey,
there you go. Yeah, they were playing Mario
Odyssey of
Odyssey.
killing dudes.
Okay, let's move on. Xbox executive says that Google doesn't have the content for a Stadia push. This is Mike Nichols. He is an executive over at Xbox, and he said emerging competitors like Google have a cloud infrastructure, a community, but they don't have the content. What do you think
So
about
they
this quote?
So they have two of the three components of this recipe, and what might be the two most important components of the recipe, but they don't have the special spice. They don't have the Emerald Lagasse Bam spice that they can throw on it. I think I think really this is just Xbox really sort of panicking because they realize how much of I don't want to say how far ahead Google is because we don't know what Stadia is, but Google has like they have the ability to have the best service just because they have the most amount of cloud architecture out in the industry right now. They have data centers everywhere around the world. Microsoft doesn't. They have their Azure cloud, but that's in a certain number of key points across the world. So yeah, I think they're just saying like, yeah, they won't have the games. I hope. They cut off the mic before he said, "I hope." So I wouldn't really worry too much about this, other than yeah, we don't know what games Stadia has because we don't really know what Stadia is yet, other than it's a name and we saw Assassin's Creed dude jumping around and killing people.
Let's go back in time just a little bit. Okay, we're gonna use my hot tub time machine. We're gonna go. That's right. If you're watching the video, we're gonna do the thing at the end of Wayne's World where we change
Yep.
the thing. We're gonna go back in time and back to when it was Sega,
Mhm.
Nintendo, and Sony were the dominant forces in the industry, and this quirky little startup decided that they were going to bring a console out for video games, and people said, "Oh my God, they don't know anything about video games. This is they make they make they make Office." We're talking about Microsoft bringing the Xbox with the OG Duke controller, which wasn't really super successful, but the
No.
second version was. And the
Mhm.
difference here is that the second version of Stadia, you don't have to buy.
That's
You
right.
don't have to buy the second version. You don't have to buy the
Yep.
first version. You don't have to buy the third version. Stadia is going to continually improve over time, and it's going to be able to fix any shortcomings that it has. And I think that Microsoft is forgetting that at one time they themselves were trying to break into this video game industry. And sure, other people have tried to do it. Ouya, I'm looking at you. But I think that if anybody is out there who I think Lloyd said it perfectly. They've got two of the three ingredients, and the two parts that they already have are the hardest parts to get. The third part just takes money. And Google has so much money, and Lloyd just disappeared. I don't see him anywhere. So
Yep.
maybe he'll come back. Oh, there he
Yep.
is. So uh, they all they need is money, and they've got money coming out of their ears. So I don't really think that we need to worry about what Mike Nichols here is saying, because in
Sure.
addition to all the money that they also have a couple of aces in their pockets. One of them being Phil Harrison, who has worked in the video game industry for 30 years. They have Jade Raymond, who is leading up their Stadia Studio. Oh, that's a weird thing to say. Where they're working on the first party stuff for Google Stadia. That's going to be the exclusives. And I'll tell you what. What Google needs here for Stadia to really take off. They need exactly one exclusive that is something that can't be done on any
Yep.
other platform, and that's what Jade Raymond is working on right now. And well, she doesn't have a lot of games under her belt, but the games she has under her belt are wildly successful games. Things like Assassin's Creed, and I think that you know, Phil Harrison was being interviewed by Polygon, and he said, "Don't read too much into why so and so was there and why so and so wasn't there." He's talking about the fact that they were giving a pitch to developers saying, "Come on board." And people are like, well,
Right.
but you only talked about id Software and Ubisoft. You didn't talk about anything else. And he said, don't read too much into why this person was or wasn't there. We have had deep conversations over a number of years now. We've shipped over 100 development kits already, and we've got thousands of creatives already underway. So you'll see a pretty amazing lineup come June. And I am, I think I believe him.
I agree. And you got to also understand that this isn't Google's first kick at the can of gaming. They have Android, which has tens of thousands of developers already. So they have content. Whether people that are Android developers can flip a switch in their development account and port to Stadia, maybe it's going to be that easy. So you're going to have all these mobile game developers with the ability to publish on the Stadia cloud. We don't know, but it's not like it's Microsoft that really didn't do games before. They had like Microsoft Game Studio, but did they really? They made a really cool pinball and solitaire and Minesweeper, I guess, were some really good things that they did back in the day. But they didn't have any sort of game publishing agreement with anybody. Anybody could write software for Windows, so they had to start right from the ground up and get the hardware, get the software, get the OS, and then start bringing on these developers. Google's been doing this for 10 years already, so they're kind of they're industry veterans, which is kind of funny because Stadia hasn't released yet. So I wouldn't worry too much about Google, but um, when a competitor comes up in the market, you either be quiet and then it looks like you're scared, or you come out and you throw the first punch, which in the end usually comes back and bites you in the butt with claim chowder quotes down the road.
Wait, what quotes?
Claim chowder. So where someone claimed something and then you feed it back to them down the road.
I've never heard of that phrase.
You've
Okay.
never heard that phrase before?
No, I've never heard of it. I'm going to use
Right.
it though because it makes me laugh. All right, this one. Speaking of things that made me laugh, this made me laugh a lot. It's this controller, and it's very funny. Some um publications will see something and they'll say, "Oh, this is what the Google Stadia controller looks like," without doing any kind of research at all. And the one that I'm looking at right here, and I actually didn't do this ahead of time, so let me grab this window and put it into the video, is this ridiculous controller. Looks like somebody took some PVC pipe and slapped it together.
Mhm.
And Lloyd and I were talking about this in the pre-show. And if you're just listening to the show, then go to the YouTube channel. Go to runjumpstomp.com/StadiaCast, and you'll find a link to the YouTube channel there. And you can see what this looks like on our video on YouTube. But oh my God, this thing is dumb looking. It's so very dumb looking. But when I looked at, I'm gonna reach for something real quick. When I looked at this controller, this is the Steam controller, which admittedly is dusty, because my PC doesn't have the best graphics card right now, so it doesn't run things at the best resolution and frame rate these days. But when this thing came out, a lot of people said that thing looks stupid, and they're right. It looks stupid, but man,
Mhm.
I love this controller. It's fantastic. So another example that I could give is my PS4 controller. This thing, right,
Right.
where is it? Right here, the D-pad. What a horrible D-pad just by looking at it. But then I played with it and I was like, oh, that D-pad's great. So, this guy certainly is good at making something that looks very, very different and very cool. And I love the idea of this giant um left thumb pad. I think that is very interesting, and how you would use that, and could that also be like a touchpad instead of just a joystick? I find that to be terribly interesting, but I don't know. I think that this is ridiculous, and Lloyd is holding up a controller as well.
even going back to the original like PlayStation 1 controller, developer like hardware developers, I guess, or concept artists, they realized that you had to have these things come out at angles. If it was straight up and down, it's not going to be comfortable. We learned that with like the Atari 2600 joysticks and things like
Hmm.
that. Holding squares that are 90-degree angles to each other is never fun. So if this thing was out at like, I don't know, a 30-degree angle, it actually might be something that would be comfortable to play on. Um, I don't know, the D pads and everything are kind of like recessed down the tube. I don't know how that's going to work, but I don't know. It's an interesting concept, but I think it needed a couple more iterations before I could even see myself wanting to test it out.
I would test it out no matter what, but I do agree with you that if they put those things at an angle, it would be better. I just like that it doesn't. And guys, just remember, this is not real. This
Hmm.
is some guy, Daniel Chung, uh, made this. So it's not a real thing. This has nothing to do. But I saw a lot of websites reporting that this is the Stadia controller, which was driving me bananas because you can just go to Google Stadia and see what the controller looks like. Um, I just find it interesting that it doesn't follow the, what's the word I'm looking for, the conventions, the standard conventions of game controller design. And I always like it when somebody tries to do something extremely different, because you never know if that could turn out to be awesome or not. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Definitely. Yeah, I like new things. Like Nintendo, we're both big Nintendo fans. They always break convention. They come out with the first D-pad and the first analog stick and the first shoulder buttons and the first motion control. Well, not the first motion control, but the first widely accepted motion control. So I love when hardware developers and concept artists work together to pull up something that's never been done before. But yeah, this one needed a little bit more baking in the oven, I think.
All right, let's move on to feedback. We've got a tweet from at Colonel Katafi, Stephen Brooks. He said, a console, or in this case, gaming platform success, often comes down to great exclusive titles that everyone wants to play. What do you think Google Stadia has up its sleeve in this department? Lloyd, I'm going to let you go first.
Oh, it's such an unknown right now. Like there's you have Raymond Studio. They're obviously working on something, but they're not going to have much time to get something out from announcement to when Google Stadia comes out. But they've also been Raymond has not been working at another development studio for a long time. So maybe they've been working on a new game for a year or more. So maybe whatever they're working on is a little bit more I don't know, close to launch. So we'll have that for sure. Who knows? We might have some other like Android type developers that are going to come out with something that maybe will not move the needle in any direction. But yeah, I don't know. Like Ubisoft, for this last generation, they've been putting out a lot of stuff on Nintendo platforms as kind of this is exclusive to Nintendo, and then they've had exclusives on other platforms as well. So with Assassin's Creed already working with them, maybe we're going to get some sort of crazy exclusive from Ubisoft. That will be kind of like the killer app for the first 6 months of the Google Stadia's life.
Assassin's Creed Online.
Maybe it'll be I don't know, like maybe it'll be something where they simulate multiple parts of the world and you're going into the simulation just like you do in the game to go to different parts of the world. But I'm just thinking of the amount of engineering that would go into something like that from a software standpoint. And if they maybe don't expect to sell a lot of copies of it, maybe that'll not happen. But then Google Stadia allows you to quickly iterate and change things because you're not forcing people to buy new hardware if you make things that much better. So yeah, maybe Assassin's Creed Online will be a thing.
Yeah, I think I think that whatever Jade Raymond and her team, which I can't remember the name of the team, I think it was just Stadia Studios, or
Yeah,
maybe it was
yeah, I
Stadia
think that's
Games or something like that. Um, Whatever her team is working on, I think that that's going to be the big launch title. for Stadia. I think that they've been working on this for a really long time. It was funny because she tweeted, "I'm relieved to finally be able to say that I'm working at Google." Like it seemed like she had been working there for a very long time before she was able to tweet that out after the Stadia announcement. And I feel like if they don't launch with a massive exclusive that is unlike anything else, then this could be a complete flop. You look at the Nintendo Switch as an example. If it hadn't launched with Breath of the Wild, we would not like our Nintendo shows would not be as successful as they are right now. I know that mine wouldn't. You've been doing your Nintendo show for years, but there's no way in hell that Nintendo Switchcraft would have been successful had it not had Nintendo not launched the Switch with Breath of the Wild, because that game by itself carried the platform to where it is now. And yes, Nintendo brought out a game after game after game that first year, but it's all resting on the shoulders of Breath of the Wild, in my opinion. And Stadia
Yep.
needs something like that. And we've got the event in May at Google I/O, and like Lloyd said, that's really more of a developer focused event. But they also try to get people excited, like consumers excited, about the new devices that you can buy. And then we've got E3 coming in June, and what's his name? Phil Harrison specifically said in June. They haven't confirmed that they're going to do anything at E3. In fact, I would be surprised if they were at E3 this year, only because the map for E3 was like that showed that Microsoft was there and Nintendo was there, and it showed who was there. I don't think that Google was on the map at all.
Hmm.
And
No, I don't remember seeing them there.
it's like they'd have to go in and kick a bunch of people out in order to buy space for themselves. So I don't anticipate that they will be at E3, but what I wouldn't be surprised by is if they set up a thing like, didn't Sony do this a couple years ago where they set up a tent outside and people would go into
Um,
the tent and play some of their stuff? Can't
uh,
remember.
there was a company on live, like one, I think one of the streaming companies did that because they couldn't actually get booth space at E3, so they had a tent outside that did it. And I think Microsoft, that's how they've done their big like media barrage. They actually have space that was next E3 or whatever, somewhere somewhere close by anyway, when they would have people running from one side to the other. So yeah, I could see Google doing something like that. We know that this year's E3, there's going to be no Sony there, so there's probably a lot of booth space that Google could have said, "Hey, we're going to be there. We're going to buy the space from you, but you can't put it on your maps because we haven't announced what our product
Oh.
is." And maybe they said, "Okay, yep, you can take all of Sony stuff." Although when you look at the maps where Sony normally is, they're not there anymore. So yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting, man. There's so many unknowns, which makes doing a show hard, but also makes doing the show fun when you talk about this platform.
Yeah, and we'll definitely be doing closer to E3. We will be doing our E3 prediction episode for, because I guarantee that even if Google doesn't show up at E3, they're going to put something out around E3 in order to try and, if I were in charge, I would be like, okay, everybody, let's wait. We've got a video waiting that unveils the price, that unveils the launch date, and all this stuff. We've got a video waiting. As
Mhm.
soon as all the other video game people drop all of their big news, right after they finished all of it, we're going to drop our video and it's going to drown everything else out. And
Right.
that's the mean Bill like, that's what mean Bill would do. I would take everybody's lunch money, basically.
Yeah, and it definitely could happen. Like I can't see them not talking about Stadia as a whole at E3. You're going to get game announcements, and Ubisofts and EAs are going to come out and say, "Yeah, it's available on PlayStation 5 and Xbox 2, but also on Stadia." Um, they're gonna announce future games for the platform. But you know Google's gonna be dropping some bombs at E3. They have to. They have to make a big splash at this industry event.
And not only that, but Nintendo has proven that you don't have to have somebody up on stage to get people's attention anymore. You can just
Yep.
drop a video with their Nintendo Directs. Xbox is following suit with their Xbox. What the hell's it called?
Yeah,
It's for
State of Play is
Play.
is Sony's. I can't remember what Xbox's was called.
Xbox forgettable. Whatever it is, I don't know. But the State of Play and Nintendo Direct, and I'm sure that Google's going to do some kind of thing. Even if they're not there, they're going to drop a video.
Yep.
All right. Let's get out of here.
Buy a ColecoVision and a Coleco game cartridge by November 15th. We'll send you a free Cabbage Patch Kid by Christmas.
All right, it's not Christmas time, but it's the end of the show, and you can follow the show on Twitter at StadiaCast. You can follow me at Run Jump Stomp, and Lloyd.
You can follow me online on Twitter at Dasme, Dasme.
And we both have lots of other shows that you should check out. You can find mine over at Run Jump Stomp, and Lloyd, where is it that people can find you? Your stuff?
You can check out all the stuff over at RezTV, REZD.TV.
That's right. And because we both have lots of other shows, it would probably be easiest for if you want to be featured on StadiaCast to use the hashtag StadiaCast when you tweet at us, because that way we can search for it and find that content for the show. Music for today's show is by Zircon. Make sure that you can check out their music stuff over at zirconstudios.bandcamp.com. I'm out of here. Lloyd's out of here. We'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.